I think it may have been what sparked this whole downfall. Did you see the interview with Voorhees and SBF?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Wow, that was a good one.
Yeah, and I remember taking away one thing, one nugget from that, which I think people listening to this should keep to heart about regulation, because regulation was the biggest topic that they disagreed on. And not regulation as a whole, but what to regulate. Like, Voorhees is like, okay, I get regulating this, I get regulating that, blah, blah, blah. But the one part that I don't really think it affects Binance. So it wasn't regulation that would negatively affect Binance in any way.
Okay.
But it was regulation of like pure software, right? Like, should pure software get regulated? Should the interfaces to access blockchains be regulated? And when I heard that SBF was pro that, that's when I'm like, throw them out the window.
The following is an interview with Paul Puey, the CEO and co-founder of Edge Wallet. Formerly Airbitz, founded in 2014, it's become one of the most trusted and versatile mobile wallet apps in the industry. Paul and his company's unwavering support of personal privacy and self-custody is brought into sharp focus during these times when so many have lost their assets to custodial firms such as FTX, BlockFi, Celsius, and many others in recent months. I hope you enjoy the interview. Well, Paul Puey, thank you for coming on my first episode of my podcast, which is as of yet unnamed.
Well, maybe by the end of this, we'll give it a name.
Okay, sounds good.
The Rich Clark Show.
Rich Clark Show. I don't know.
That's so original. Yeah, not too many Rich Clarks, I presume, that are doing podcasts.
There are actually lots of Rich Clarks.
But doing podcasts on crypto?
Probably not.
Or is this a crypto podcast? I don't even know.
For now.
For now it is? After the first episode it is? All right.
So, yeah, I don't know the end format, but, it could be about anything.
We'll roll with it.
Okay.
Cool.
So, tell us about Paul Puey.
Oh my gosh, where do we start?
Yeah, well, I know you have a legit technical background, a whole life before crypto.
Yeah, I've always been a tech dork since I was a kid. Had a computer back in I think second grade, which was in the early 80s. And I remember I talked about this at a recent meetup for Chainlink, which was like, hey, what are some of the most memorable moments in your life in technology, most memorable technologies? And to me, it was the transitions of technology. And that transition from using a Commodore 64, which is what I started off with, and any app that I wanted to run, even if it was just a game, required me to type commands on a command line just to load a game. And then transitioning from that to kind of what we have today, where I click a few buttons and there's a whole app store and I could see these icons and previews and suddenly I'm running a game, right? That transition was what has been probably the most mind-blowing to me in tech. It's not any one specific tech, it's when it moves. Right. And what you used to do changes to what you no longer have to do, enabling your brain to focus on other things and your brain being able to kind of use higher level tooling to accomplish more things. So you're not spending all your time just like, hey, how do I load the app? But yeah, that's kind of the start of my entry into tech. Being a gamer, playing games on an old Commodore 64, writing little programs. And I think that's actually one thing that I miss a bit about that era is it put programming in front of your face. Like when you went to go launch a game, you're basically writing
command line. The
command line was you're writing a short 12-character program. For those of my age that can remember, I think it was like load, open quote, star, close quote, comma 8, comma 1. Right, it was what you were running, and I didn't know what the hell that meant. So as a kid, it made me want to look it up. Like, what does this even mean? So I looked up the Commodore Basic Manual on how to do stuff, and then I started learning. Oh, I can do other things. I can do print. Oh, I can do an if statement. Oh my God, and I can do this for loop in good old Commodore Basic, and that was kind of my entry point into coding. It's because I just needed to run a program. Whereas now there's this huge barrier between using and developing. So you have to kind of really want to go and code.
It's like magic now.
Yeah, it's like to the end user, coding is magic. Don't get me wrong now. It is super easy to code to do very high-level things. Like, sure, it was in front of my face for me to be able to code, but what could I do? I could print a few characters onto the screen. I couldn't do much with that. If I wanted to do anything more, it was a huge hurdle. Whereas now, you're hidden from the magic, But if you actually want to go and do stuff, you can get in a day up a website where you can got buttons and you can click and launch little modals and put stuff on screen, put images. That would be years of work back in those days. So it's a bit of both lower barrier to entry today, but also higher.
I remember my grandfather took a basic class in 1980 something, and I remember one of his projects he did was to have the computer draw his signature. And the way he did that is he had to write his signature on graph paper, and then plot each point of his signature, and then have the computer just plot it out. And now, of course,
pixels.
And now, of course, we just
yeah,
sign with our finger.
That's and instead of having a few pixels, we have millions of them.
Yeah, where
plotting that today on graph paper at the resolution a computer could do would take you months. Right. Yeah, impossible. So yeah, technology has advanced. So that was kind of my start and entry into computer science as a kid. And I think by around 6th grade, I remember picking up a book on programming. And my mom was actually a programmer.
Really?
She doesn't do it. She didn't really code anymore at the time, but she had done some coding. And to give an idea of, I kind of like make fun of her. Go, oh, you used those punch cards and whatnot. She goes, Paul, that was like the very end of my college days, where they just it was a nostalgia thing. They'd show us that
the punch cards.
People still use punch cards, but I never actually worked with punch cards. She's like, I'm not that old, right? But I remember her coming home and getting the phone handle. Right, these weren't cell phones. Getting the phone handle, and the way she would dial in to work, when she would quote unquote remote work from home, was she got this machine that looked like electronic typewriter, and it had 2 ear pads that you'd take your phone and plug into.
It's the thing from War Games.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, you remember the thing from War Games, and and there was no screen.
Right.
So it only had a thermal printer. And that was your command line. So as you typed, it would show on the printer, and you hit enter, it would print the response.
From the computer,
from the server.
From the other
server.
end.
Yeah, it was just a dumb terminal, and there was a computer on the other end. I remember I'd pick up the phone, trying to make a call, and would screw her whole thing up. Which, it still existed in the modem era of the 90s. People still used modems in the 90s.
That's when I came around. Like 28.8 modem, or 14.4.
14.4. I think I came into 2400 baud, so it was like a generation before that.
Yeah, so I've heard the music.
Yep, the sound of technology. Actually, interesting story about that. I got really into online. I don't know what you would call it. It wasn't the internet. It was like bulletin board systems.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of those or gotten involved in those? I actually ran the largest BBS in the entire San Francisco Bay Area.
Really?
Largest meaning I had 2 phone lines in my home dedicated to the BBS.
Wow.
And not only that, but back in the day, in order for you to make a free phone call, you had to be pretty close to the phone number you were calling. People don't even think of how close you are to a phone number nowadays, right? But phone numbers had regions. So there's your area code, and then within your area code, you're like, your 3-digit prefix and your 4-digit whatever, and that would be in certain zones of a location. So I was in San Bruno, California, which is like a suburb of San Francisco. And I noticed only a few people could call into the house for free. And back then, it was really expensive to make it a toll call. These weren't even long distance. They were just toll calls. Like if you were in literally San Francisco and you called San Bruno, that would be a toll call.
Really?
Which means you'd pay per minute. And that's great if you're just going to call and say, hey, I'll be over your house. That'd be terrible if you're actually online downloading something on a BBS or chatting with people. And so what I did was I paid for phone numbers for my friends' homes that had no actual line. You just pay a flat per month fee, and then you pay for a forwarding service. So they'd call that number, and it would forward to my number. So I had about 5 phone numbers around the entire San Francisco Bay Area that would call and forward to other numbers to eventually get to my home. Wow. So people could connect to my BBS.
Did people think you were super cool because you had all these?
I don't know what cool meant back then. I was a dork kid that would go to these. They weren't called meetup groups at the time.
No,
what did they call them? They called them user groups.
Okay.
Right, user groups for like Commodore and PCs and whatnot. I would go to those. But yeah, I'd tell people, hey, I've got this BBS. Come on, dial in. And I was running my old like Commodore Amiga at the time, so it was a level up from the old 64. And I remember hearing the music while having dinner with mom and dad. Oh, someone's calling in. I would drop everything and like go to the computer and start chatting with them. Like, hey, how's it going? Welcome to my BBS. Right.
Right.
And they're like, hey, how are you doing? All right. And they'd post a few messages on the forum. They'd read a few forum messages. They'd download some pirated software, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember I had a friend of mine who was really good with BBS stuff when I was in high school or middle school or something, and he could get like the super pixelated pictures of like Cindy Crawford in bathing suits or whatever,
in 8-bit color.
Yeah.
By the time I had the Amiga, you had probably a little bit better images, but yeah, we'd be downloading, just see the it wasn't a JPEG at the time, it wasn't even a GIF. Well, it could have been a GIF, but you just see it line by line,
right?
Line by line downloading. You'd see like rows slowly downloading. You're right. Cindy Crawford was a hot item back then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So some random software, some games, and I remember sometimes I wouldn't have what someone wanted like on the drive, so I'd literally go and grab some floppies, plug it in, and then they can go download it. So yeah, that was back 6th, 7th grade or so, where I started doing that and doing like a tiny bit of coding. The BBS was some, shareware software. That's what they called it back then. Like open source wasn't really a term. I'm sure it was, but it wasn't something that crossed my plate. And so it was shareware, where you would just release your code out onto.
Yeah, I remember shareware.
I mean, it wasn't the internet, so I'm like, you'd put it on BBSs. You'd release the code onto BBSs. People would share it, and if you liked it, you'd pay a little money. And I would literally get checks in the mail for some code that I wrote.
Huh.
I wrote a really simple database because, well, you're a real estate agent, right?
Yes.
And I know you love marketing yourself, right, Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
My dad was pretty good about marketing himself, and so he would have his farm, his region of the neighborhood, that he would send all those annoying magnets and flyers, like, hey, you want to sell your home, you want to buy a home, come to me, Tony Puey, blah, blah, blah. And I was the kid in his office that would stick address labels on hundreds of envelopes, stamp them, get the whole thing rubber banded, like packs of these envelopes, and send them to the post office. And he needed a way to keep track of all these addresses. I wrote a database for it.
Oh, right. First, like CRM.
Barely. It's basically a database of names and addresses.
Yeah.
And then an interface for you to edit them, all not command line, but text, all text based. And I hired my cousins and a buddy to literally data enter all of these addresses and names into the database, which I held on like a little floppy disks and whatnot, print them out on my dot matrix printer, literally stick them by hand onto these envelopes and stamp, put stamps on them.
I can still hear the sound of the dot matrix as well.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing dot matrices could do that you can't do today is print out those giant banners.
Yes. Yeah, I remember those. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday in color, right?
Yeah.
You can't do that with any of these laser printers, because you have to stick the paper together and whatnot. But anyway, yeah.
We've devolved.
We've gone backwards in some ways. Yep. There's many small instances of that, how we've gone a little bit backwards. But yes, that was kind of a evolution of my entry into technology, and seeing that was my path forward. I wanted to get into something relevant to tech as early as grade school, and I feel like I can't remember what I've done since then, but quite a few things since then.
Yeah, quite a few things.
A handful of things.
Where were you working before you started Airbits, now Edge?
There's only two answers to that question. I think for your audience, they'd be like, okay, well, he's a developer tech. What tech stuff did he do? What tech companies did you work for? But I did take a break from tech. So the most relevant thing, I think, to Airbits Edge that I had worked with or at recently before that was actually Nvidia. And that was in an era when they were obviously unrelevant to crypto because crypto didn't exist. So this is an era of like the late 90s to mid 2000s, like 98 through 2005. I worked in Silicon Valley. Nvidia specifically was around that 98, 2005 era. And I'd worked briefly for only a couple of months at a company right before that called Chromatic Research. They were bought by ATI eventually, but they did have massive layoffs. So I know what it's like to go through bull and bear markets and layoffs and whatnot. I left there to go to Nvidia and then stayed there for almost 10 years, like 7-8 years. and I enjoyed working on kind of like that hard problem in computer science. You know, there's, I think, straightforward computer science where you've got the tools. What you're building is something that's been built before with a bit of a tweak. Like you're going to build a website, you're going to build a mobile app that's, you know, the new Uber, but the Uber of this. Right. You got the tooling all there. And what I did like about Nvidia is they were building stuff that kind of didn't exist before. Like no one had built 3D that could render these algorithms that were just, you know, PhD thesis type things. And being surrounded by those people like was humbling. You know, they appreciated the work that I did and you know, how much I worked and the problems I solved, but I felt like I was just surrounded by geniuses over there, like really sharp people.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I feel like that. I was a physics major in college. Not many people know that, but and I did okay. I enjoyed physics, and I kind of took it as a challenge. I was like, well, if I can get a physics degree, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And,
I get a
but
physics
the
degree.
guys,
I failed physics in college.
We only had I went to Georgia Southern University, and we only had like 8 majors, so 8 like students in. They were
wow.
It's a huge department because every science, tech, engineering student has to take physics. So we had like a big faculty,
right?
But there were only like 8 actual majors, so it was like a little family. And these guys were just all so dang smart, and they'd run circles around me. And
it's humbling,
they still
but
do to this day.
It definitely elevates your brain to be surrounded by those people.
Yeah.
And while I don't know that I retained a whole lot of that, I think kind of the desire to think, the desire to kind of put your brain onto hard problems is what I got out of that experience, you know, in working there. So that was kind of like the right after college, you know, for my real working entry into technology. But after that, for like 10 so years before I had discovered Bitcoin, I was actually working in small business, like almost completely away from tech. I mean, I would be the Excel sheet dude at a small business. I could run the QuickBooks, and if they needed a little bit of some macros for the Excel sheet, I would do that. But for the most part, you know, didn't really consider myself like, you know, working in tech. Like I wasn't technically working in tech.
Why did you, what drove you to leave Nvidia and hop into this, you know, work, you know, did it remind you of working with your dad or something?
No, it was, I was kind of forced to do it, health reasons.
Oh, okay.
So health reasons got me leaving. I got really burnt out with like repetitive strain, like my arms, neck, back. Silly
working
story.
On computers?
Working on computers, just day in and day out. I've always been fortunate and unfortunate to absolutely love what I do. So that's a fortunate thing. Time goes by at the blink of an eye.
Right.
And you could probably guess why that's also unfortunate.
Right.
Right. Like, how late were you up getting all this shit set up?
Too late.
Too late. Exactly. But guess what? How long did it feel like it took?
Yeah. It's easy once you start tweaking stuff.
When you start tweaking stuff, it's like, was that really 2 hours or was that 2 minutes?
Right.
And that's me for most of what I did in my life. Right. And so I loved what I did there at NVIDIA. And I actually also did some stuff on the side when I was there. I built kind of an early, well, I don't call it an early Facebook, but I built this site for my friends called Summer Madness because we loved doing stuff outside. We'd play volleyball, played softball, and our friends had I wouldn't call it a web page, but it was what's called like a Unix account, right? In college, you can get these free Unix accounts,
okay,
where you can do email. They're these command line accounts, and there was a feature in Unix that it sounds a little inappropriate, but there's this command in Unix called finger.
Okay.
Right. And you could finger someone else's account. It sounds so horrible to this day, but you know, these computer dorks, they don't care what they call things, right?
Yeah.
And you could put a file in your account called a .finger.
Okay.
And that file is just a text file, and you just put whatever you want in that text file. And when you finger someone's account, you get that text.
Okay.
Right? You just see whatever text they put on there.
It's like poking somebody.
It's like poking somebody, but it's more like putting like your status.
Right.
And you put your status, you want to check what the person's status is. So people would say, you know, I'm going to hang out tonight, or just came from this bar or whatnot. And then you could like finger their account and see what is in their little finger status.
Right.
This was in like the early 90s when I was at Berkeley. And so we would have this account that we would call Summer Madness. So it's like Summer Madness at, you know, some machine name, right? and people would finger it to figure out what was going on for the week. Oh, we're going to play volleyball Wednesday night over at Joel's frat house.
Right.
We're going to go play softball this weekend. Oh, this is what we did last weekend, you know, and here's who showed up. It was like a mini website that was just text, all right?
Yeah.
And you can get to it pretty easily. So we took that and turned it into a website, which is kind of fairly static. And then while I was working at Nvidia, I decided, I want to make this much more rich. Like, PHP and MySQL just crossed my plate. I'm like, whoa, we can make this like programmable. We can put this into a database. We can add people, remove people. We can post photos. We can tag people in photos. People could join and leave. Mm-hmm. And so that was the kind of start of the site and domain I created, which was like summermadness.com.
Right.
And, we had a few dozen of our friends in there, more people joining, probably like 50 people at most. And then, of course, the non-entrepreneur in me got a request from someone to join. He's like, hey, I really like this site. Can I join? And it was someone from like New York or somewhere. I'm like, it's really just a local site for my buddies and friends to hang out. And I kind of like stopped him from joining.
Okay.
And in retrospect, obviously, like, this site was a precursor to social media.
Right.
Didn't think of it as a business at all. Right. And it kind of like just stayed that way and died when real social media came out.
Yeah,
but
because MySpace would have come out like a few years later.
Actually, Friendster, for anyone that remembers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Friendster came out, and that was like, oh my God, I didn't realize I built like the first Friendster. But it was like permission to Friendster.
You were even in San Francisco.
I was in the Bay Area, yeah.
I mean, you had it all.
It was all sitting there right in front of me. It was sitting right there. But it was just a hobby project that I had no inclination to turn into a company because I didn't know what the company would do.
Right.
And plus I loved what I did at Nvidia. Right. I didn't want to leave. All right. So getting back to your question, like what made me transition, like I love what I did. I worked like mad on whether it be actual work or these side projects. And then, I just broke down. And so forced to leave at the height of my health issues. I didn't lose my voice, but I strained my voice doing early dictation software.
Okay.
Like trying to write emails and comment on code using dictation software, and it just strained my voice. And I even, using a mouse, like mice did exist when I was using, so mice did exist to alleviate some of the strain of like clicking the mouse. I bought these old Apple mice, which are actually not that different from them today, that didn't have buttons where you click the whole thing by pushing the whole thing down.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Still the same way today. I'd put that on the floor and tap on it with my foot.
Oh, wow.
All right. I was like, I would do anything to still keep working. I was just so driven to continue being a technologist and use a computer until I literally strained my ankle. I was just so broken down. I was like, I'd go to a doctor and I go, you did what? And then you did what? And then, are you kidding me? Right. And so, really broke down, had to leave. And at the moment when I left.
You're probably like a trailblazer in like repetitive stress for computer science.
I'll say this. I'm both a trailblazer, but I am all of our staff's biggest warning.
Right.
I warn them to death. I go, this is real, and it will ruin you. And so as soon as I sense anyone in our team like running into those issues, I'll like go put a break timer on their computer, right, and tell them to do the exercises and stretch, and we'll have like a workout area, And so, it's a warning.
I found that for the mouse thing, I found a good solution. It was it's the trackball that you move with your thumb, and then your wrist doesn't even move. And then I can click with my fingers, and they don't really move. Because I guess your thumb is more able
tolerant
to deal with repetitive.
It's more able to, but I guarantee you could wreck that too, because I did.
Okay.
I tried that as well.
Yeah.
And then I eventually wrecked the thumb.
Okay.
So believe me, you can wreck anything in your body with enough, thousands of movements.
Wow.
Just a matter of, how many. You're right. Thumbs can do better, but then they're 2x better. But then it just takes 2x as long. That was what motivated me to leave. And really, in many ways, that was one of the first kind of recovering from that was the first aha moment that really saw the light of kind of alternate reality. Meaning, when I say alternate realities, people today that are like not in crypto, not in Bitcoin, just like your standard, I don't call them like the statist, but Just people that just go through the motions of society and don't really question the narrative.
Got it.
Right? People don't question the narrative. That was me at first. This was my first entry into questioning the narrative, was health. Because every doctor that I went to just gave me like shots or drugs, like, hey, take this painkiller, take this anti-inflammatory, you name it, cortisone shots or cortisone pads, and they didn't fix the problem. And me being like just me, and I wouldn't question any of that. I'm like, all right, thanks. I went to the doctor. That's what he said. I'll keep going.
Mm-hmm.
No doctor, number one, no doctor said stop.
Right.
And that is the number one thing. It hurts. Stop doing it. Right. They said, do this, you know,
That's
and then
the
you should
old
be fine.
joke. Doctor, it hurts when I do this.
But,
Don't do that.
It should simply be like, don't do that, right? And instead, no, take these drugs and then go back. And when no doctor could help, what could help were the things that doctors never recommended. You know, I started seeing like physical therapists and chiropractors. Like chiropractic actually is what really helped. It had nothing, like not necessarily cracking my back and whatnot. They just saw the world in a different way. Like they saw healthcare in a very different way, in a much more holistic way, where it was about, okay, stop. Stop what you're doing. Right. That hurts. B, let's find out why it hurts. Like, where is the problem? And then how do we heal that part of your body, and how do we strengthen it? And it was through years of that, and like massage therapists, and really healing the body, not just duct taping it.
Right.
Like doctors like duct taping your body is kind of what I've experienced, as opposed to physical therapists, chiropractors, massage therapists, really try to heal. And I really started questioning what I hear from like the narrative. That was my first entry. And I started getting a lot better. I remember I had a massage therapist that said, have you tried climbing? And I go, oh, are you crazy? I can barely like hold books. I remember it would hurt for me to take, you've got this Encyclopedia Britannica here. I'm going to expose to the audience here. Okay. They've got this collection. It would hurt for me to take one of those books and put it back on a shelf if it was above my head.
Wow.
Like literally just holding the book and going like this motion with this like angle in your wrist would kill. And there's times where I'd hold plates of food and a sharp pain would come out and I'd nearly drop the plate if someone wouldn't catch it.
Wow.
So I said to this massage therapist, I go, God, climb, are you crazy? I can barely like hold plates. And he was like, let's keep working on you for a few months. Let's get you from like acute to more chronic, where it's like you're not acute painful. It's just more chronic, where you just have to avoid certain things, and then give it a try. And lo and behold, I did give it a try, and that changed my life. And that's actually the small business that I ended up working in. Was
Paul Honnold?
Hodled. Hodled holds, yep.
No.
Yep.
Honnold, like Alex Honnold.
Alex Honnold.
Yeah,
exactly. Actually, I met him several times. He came to the gym that I worked at.
Really?
Which leads me to what I did most recently. Was I literally worked at a climbing gym.
Okay.
I was a program manager and adult instructor for basics of outdoor climbing, lead climbing, gear and anchors. Being an engineer, you really resonate with the geeking out on the equipment of climbing.
Right.
There's a lot of science.
Don't drop your carabiner.
Don't, and also the angle of your anchors, there's tension and force and whatnot. So you kind of geek out on the equipment. And that's literally the most recent thing I did. I was actually working at a gym at the time I founded Airbits, and overlapped for a bit, because I gave them like a lot of notice. I didn't give them 2 weeks. I gave them like 2 months notice. I said, I'll make it easy on you guys because I love what you guys are doing at this gym and I don't want to make it hard for you to transition. But that's literally what I was doing when I discovered Bitcoin. That's what I was doing when I started going to the meetups. That's what I was doing when I found co-founders and started the company. And so that's the long answer to, I think, the question you mentioned of, what were you doing for Bitcoin?
Right. Awesome. So when you started going to meetups, is that where you met the people you end up co-founding the Airbits project?
Yep. Started going to meetups in middle of 2013. I think we're approximately the same class. What do we say? Class of 25? Class of 25?
Yeah, class of 25. 25 block reward.
Yep. So Bitcoin was post the initial halving, like Bitcoin started off with like 50 Bitcoin per block. And now then it became 25. That's when we kind of entered the space. So that was May-ish of 2013, maybe April. I can't remember if it was April or May, but I think May-ish. Started going to some meetups that were already founded. It was actually the meetup that still exists today that we host at Edge, at the offices in Edge. Same meetup group, got rebranded a little bit, just to show people it wasn't pure Bitcoin. Now it's Bitcoin and open blockchain. But I started going to that. I remember my first meetup event had, I think, 2 other people. That was it.
Right.
2 people showed up. Next one, maybe 3, sometimes 2 again. And it wasn't until like October, as the price started ramping up again at the end of 2013. I remember we got like 12 people. And we're like, oh my God, 12
right after,
whole people.
Silk Road went down.
Yeah. Irony, huh? Like price went up after Silk Road.
Yeah, it went down for like a day. And then it went up to 200 or I don't know what it was.
Yep.
I don't remember.
It shot up. It broke that like 150 that it was sitting at for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Or long meaning like a few months.
Yeah.
So yeah, I discovered that, and I remember that first meetup when 12 people showed up. I was talking to one of the guys there, and we really clicked. And that ended up being one of my co-founders, Damon Cotillo. And he came out of doing startups in tech, and he was a web developer. And it was his co-founder at another at his previous startup who came out to the same meetup. I think a couple months later, Tim Horton, who eventually became another co-founder of ours. So I met both of them through the same meetup group. And then William Swanson, who's co-founder, is still with us today. He's our core architect, and he's the anchor and heart of our technology. All the hard stuff we do, like think of like the hard algorithmic stuff that I worked with when I was at Nvidia. That kind of hard stuff that we do is entirely like on his plate. All of the cryptography, the synchronization, that's unique to Edge is what he built. And then I met him as well at a meetup at a pizza shop, in I think Carlsbad in San Diego. Okay. And the 4 of us were the core kind of day-to-day active co-founders. And then we have 2 other co-founders, which at the time weren't like day-to-day active. Scott Morgan came on board. You may have met Scott. He's come to a bunch of events. Possibly. I know he came to one of the early events the first time we came out to Atlanta. But he wasn't like day-to-day active. He put in some funds into the company and did a little part-time, sweat equity work. And the same with Kevin Sullivan, and all of them I met through the Meetup conference community, and all, still active in
This is something
in
I'm
crypto.
a little self-conscious about because, aside from my meetup in Atlanta it was founded by BitPay, so that was, that was obviously a successful company. And then we took it over, myself and a couple other guys took it over in 2015. But we never had any startups, to my knowledge, that really came out of our meetups. I'm like, oh, and all these other meetups have like, like the Denver meetup has a bunch of startups that came out of the Denver meetup, and the of course the ones out west. It's kind of makes sense, I guess, more out there. But
that's not something you have to hold against a community, because a lot of things happen even in the I won't call it like in secret, but without it being widely known. Like people make connections, they learn, they pass on knowledge, and it's a ripple effect that you just can't really monitor. Right. You don't know the ripple effect of what you've done. And I still get, messages to this day from people from way back, like years back, like, hey, thanks for that little bit of Bitcoin you gave me. Thanks for showing me this. Thanks for showing me to avoid that. Yeah.
Well, last night at our meetup, you were in town for my meetup, Bitcoin Atlanta, and I found I think one of the original transactions you sent me. I think it was, but it was like $3 in Bitcoin at the time.
Wow.
It's 160 now today, even with it being down.
I do remember one of the original transactions I sent you, but at the time Airbits wasn't live, so I didn't send it to you in Airbits.
Yeah,
it was a different wallet you were using.
Yeah, I don't know what wallet that was, but yeah, it was probably my Salient or something.
Probably. We should go look at that one, because that one's going to be a lot.
Yeah, that one.
That one's going to be a lot, because I remember that was for like a hotel.
Yeah, so that's how I
think like
that's how I met
$70.
you. Do you remember
I remember
Tatiana Moroz. Yeah.
Yep.
I went to, it was the Texas Bitcoin conference or something. Actually, recently when I was cleaning out this basement, found the brochure for that.
Oh my god!
And I was like,
I so wish I kept all the swag from this. You could
have
make
a whole drawer full.
You can make a museum out of that stuff.
Yeah, maybe I will someday.
Yeah.
People were selling Bitcoin magazines from back then. like during the top of the cycle for like $1,000 or like thousands of dollars.
We have a stack of a whole bunch of old Bitcoin magazines in our office.
Maybe you should. Maybe there's your retirement plan.
Yeah, there you go.
We thought we were building this awesome app, but instead we just became like magazine magnates.
We're just collectors, and in this era we're supposed to turn them in NFTs, right? That's what
you
do.
could NFT, make it a collection.
Yeah, it's a whole collection.
But yeah, so I was staying at the hotel, which was nowhere near the conference. The hotel that was for like the speakers and whatever. I ended up staying there, and Tatiana was like, "Hey, my friend Paul's looking for a
place to crash.
You have 2 beds in your room?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I literally met you at like 11 p.m. or maybe it was later than that, because you were talking to the MadeSafe guys for a long time. You just rolled in. I was like,
that's actually why I went to the conference. I was really excited about MadeSafe, and I'm really bummed that project really didn't come to life.
I don't know what happened to them at all.
They raised a bunch of money on an ICO.
Weird.
They'd been building for years prior to crypto even existing. Yeah, they've been building for a long time, and I still lightly hear a little bit about it, but I know some of the main people that I had been in contact with over the years with MadeSafe are no longer with the project. So it is unfortunate, but they were doing something that was hugely ambitious, more ambitious than some of the projects in the decentralized storage space today, because that's what their main pitch was, decentralized storage. But it was storage that was not just decentralized, but fully encrypted, where only the end user could see it. Now, that's something that I don't see.
Their goal was to, if I remember right, was to make it to where you could sit down at any computer in the world, and as long as you had your credentials, you basically have your computer right there. Like you just log in, and it'd be like having an AWS server, except there's no AWS server.
It's nodes, and they'd be doing all the calculations. It would store all your data. And at the time when we were building Airbits, the core of the app was supposed to be able to store and encrypt and synchronize private keys, like client-side encrypted, use but don't trust the cloud, right? And synchronize between your devices. And we had an idea of an architecture for that, but we didn't implement it yet. And when MadeSafe popped up, I said, "Oh my God, we could use this." And that's why, I don't know if you know, the reason why I needed a place to crash was I made the decision to go there super last minute. Like literally 2 days before I showed up, I said, I'm going to go there because I found that the MadeSafe team was going to be there.
Right.
And they took a meeting with me on the spot, and it took me out to dinner. Actually, it was 2 of them and me just at dinner. I think first night of the conference or second night, I can't remember. So that was a super last minute decision, which actually, heck, if I didn't make, I might have never met Rich.
Hey, there you go.
You know? So that was probably the best part about MadeSafe. So if it wasn't for MadeSafe, I might not be here right now doing this podcast. But went out there and needed a place to crash. And thank you, Tatiana, for making the introduction.
But you paid me like $100 or something in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's somewhere near my ceiling. You could probably look at the history and see what that.
Yeah.
It was worth now.
Oh well. Lots of water under the bridge there.
No, there is.
And
for sure.
And gone opportunities.
No, that's okay.
Speaking of decentralized storage, I don't know if you remember this, but Sean, that's founded Storage, won that hackathon.
Yeah, that's where it started.
At that conference.
I do remember.
Yeah.
I didn't see the presentation, but I know that Storage, or Storge, as some people will call it, came out of that conference.
And that's when I found out about Ethereum as well, because Vitalik was there. And I actually got super involved in the Ethereum chat. I don't know what it was called back in the day.
It's not Discord at the time.
No, it was a website. You had to log in, and
it's kind of like Bitcoin
it was
Talk.
Like Bitcoin Talk, but it was for it
Ethereum.
might have been a thread on Bitcoin Talk.
Yeah, because Bitcoin Talk was actually pretty open to other coins.
Yeah,
it wasn't a maxi site at all.
But I feel like it wasn't. I feel like it was their own site, but because they were going back and forth about whether to do CPU versus GPU mining.
I see.
So I actually wrote this article called "Ode to GPU Mining" because I was a GPU miner at the time. I love GPU mining, and I still do. I'm sad that it's having kind of a rough fall, winter.
Well, for the miners, extra rough because of Ethereum coming off mining.
The GPU miners. I looked up. I mean, I've got a giant miner sitting right here, but I call this my winter miner.
Keep you warm.
Yeah, in the winter, as it gets cold down here in the winter, and I just crank up the miner. And
I believe it.
But not anymore. I looked up the, on whattomine.com or whatever, and it's it's terrible.
There's nothing left.
Yeah.
So everyone really was mining ETH.
But
I'm not a miner, so I never knew really what miners would mine.
I have a couple sad ETH stories. I was all set to like get into what now would be referred to the ICO. That's what they call it back. It was just the
issuance.
Yeah, it was
whatever.
the pre-mine, or I don't know. Yeah. And I was going to put 2 Bitcoin into it, which would have been like 4,000 ETH, something like that.
Wow.
But for some reason, I like checked out at the wrong time. Didn't check the forums for a month or two, and then it happened.
It already happened, right?
I remember where I was when I found out it happened. I was driving downtown. I was talking to my friend Aaron, who ran some ATMs at the time, and he had the first like Lamassu ATM in town, and it was called Atlanta Bitcoin. He had like a
nice
thing. He now works for Bakkt, actually.
Bakkt, is that still around?
Yeah, they're here in town.
They're still around.
I mean, it's run by ICE, so it's like it's a pretty big, deep pockets operation.
Got it. Yeah.
So, but anyhow, and he's like, so did you buy that Ethereum? I was like, no, would it happen? He was like, dude, yeah, they already distributed and everything. It's trading. And I was like, well, what's it at? And he was like, it's at like $2. I was like, no, I missed the boat. It's at $2. And I was so mad. And then, so I was like, well, I'm not going to get it now. It's already pumped, to $2.
Yeah.
And
I didn't get it then. I got it like $8.
And then we had a guy at my meetup. He was a super interesting guy. I won't mention his name. He probably doesn't want me to, but he was actually a spook from Brazil. He was like a Brazilian secret
agent kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. He worked for the Brazilian government,
infiltrating the crypto scene.
But his wife got a job at the Brazilian consulate here, so they moved here. They lived here for a while, and he was a super cool guy, and he lives in Portugal now.
With the rest of the crypto folks.
Yes, and he no longer works for the Brazilian government, I don't think.
He saw the light.
But you never know.
Did he see the light?
I mean, but he was like, "Oh, you need," because I told him I had all my miners, because it was like 2015 or something, and I told him I had all my miners like shut off because it was bear market. There was a few things. I lost my location where I had them running, and so they were just sitting here in my basement. And he was like, "Oh, you need to start mining Ethereum with them." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good idea." I actually was they actually did end up adopting GPU mining as opposed to CPU. So I was like, "Well, I might as well." So I got out one of my miners, started messing with it, and it just would not work. And so eventually I just threw my hands up and was like, I guess I'm not doing this. I guess I don't have the chops to get the Ethereum thing going. And so I put it away and
just buy some.
And I should have.
Yeah.
But it was hanging out at like $4, I think, at that time, and I could have mined a bunch of it because I had a bunch of GPUs. I had like 30 something GPUs, and I guess it's not a bunch, but
it's when things are hard that they're most worth it.
So fast forward like a year or a year and a half. I hold another meetup, and I run into a guy who later became one of our co-organizers, and he's mining. GPU mining. I was like, "Oh, GPU mining? Are you making money?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What are you mining?" And he's like, "Zcash." I was like, "Oh, really?
Okay.
Check this out." And he's like, and so I told him the stuff I had, and he's like, "Dude, you can make like $1,000 a month or something." If you have this, I was like, "Oh, okay." So I get all my old miners out, and I start like cranking them up. I gave some to this other guy to run for a while, and come to find out, the one that I'd used to test the Ethereum stuff
was bad.
It had something wrong with the OS. Nothing worked on it.
The computer.
Yeah.
So not the GPUs themselves.
No, it was the OS. I needed to reinstall the OS. Like it had something that was broken, and had I picked any of the other computers. 7 computers to do the Ethereum mining, I could have been mining Ethereum for like a year. But I just so
painstaking. Well, that's Windows for you, right?
That is Windows for you. It was Windows 8. That was the one that crashed. So I've always been a Windows guy.
I was Windows guy all during my era at Nvidia and for a while after. And I think it wasn't until I kind of stopped being a tech guy and just kind of worked in small business that I was like, oh, the Mac actually works pretty well for me. I'm not a gamer anymore. I'm not trying to buy GPUs and spend hours configuring, my drivers and whatnot, which I was happy to do back then. Now it's like I had to save every keystroke. When I started using a computer again, I'm like, okay, I couldn't afford every keystroke.
I was just talking to a friend of mine about this a couple days ago, because I was having some computer problems, and I was like, there's nothing more aggravating than computer problems. Like and I remember my dad like spending hours and hours, back in the IBM PC compatible day, IBM PC compatible.
When people use the word IBM to describe a PC.
Right, exactly. And so, something would be wrong and it just take forever to chase it down. Now, if something breaks, it's just like, go to Micro Center, get a new one,
replace it,
and like you're back up and running. Like the hardware is so cheap and it's so
It's
reliable.
disposable.
Like it's a totally different.
It's a migration that not just computers have done, but cars and a lot of just consumer equipment. I don't know if you know the podcaster Casey Neistat.
Yeah, I do actually.
Right?
Yeah,
Great podcaster, and he was mentioning one of the products that he loves, which he influenced me to buy one because I love it. It's awesome for San Diego as a boosted board. And he had mentioned one thing unique to the company in the landscape of consumer products is that while the product was really expensive, it bucked a trend. And that trend was build a product where, if it breaks, just replace it. Like cars are this way. Like it's super easy to total your car, right? Because the definition of totaling a car is the cost to fix exceeds the value of the car. So it's really easy to build things like this where it's just kind of all one monolithic thing, and you break one piece of it, the whole thing has to get replaced. That's a lot easier than building a lot of individual parts, right? And each part being serviceable. And Boosted did exactly that. They built really good individual parts and made each part serviceable so that you could replace them. But still, like the entire thing as a whole had the same quality and longevity as one of these things that's just full one piece unserviceable. So it is a trend in our ecosystem. It does reduce cost, but it also in some ways also increases waste in the sense that, it doesn't work, toss it, go get another one. If things just worked for a really long time, that wouldn't be a big deal. But we still run into issues where things do die.
My phone is 100 phone years old.
Not dog years.
I have a Galaxy S9. It's from 2017. I think it came out.
Oh, that actually is. That is actually almost 100 phone years old.
So I mean, it's incredible to think about because it's literally been on
like the whole time.
For 7 years or however long that is.
I'm actually surprised that that's actually survived that long.
I can't do math. Apparently, it's 5 years.
I'm actually surprised it has lasted that long because I've definitely had and heard stories of a lot of phones just kind of like up and dying. If anything, just the battery just dies.
The battery actually surprisingly still is okay. It's not
what it used to be.
nearly what it used to be.
Yeah.
But I'm used to it.
None of us are.
I just have
chargers left and around.
You
have just plugs lying around in different parts of the house and in the
battery
car.
Packs.
Battery packs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I kind of got to keep tethered, but it'll last.
This is your true hodler, folks. Rich here.
I wish I could hodl Bitcoin like I hodl phones and other things. I was a big gold silver bug before I became a Bitcoiner. And
that was kind of your entry into realizing the
hard
alternate
money
reality.
And all that. Yeah. And so
buck the narrative.
I knew about Bitcoin. I was emailing another gold bug friend of mine about it in like 2011.
Oh wow!
And
so you knew about it that long ago. So you're not technical class of 50.
I might be class of 50.
You're class of 50.
I have the emails, and
no one told me about it back then.
And we were emailing back and forth. I was like, because I was I was big into Ron Paul for president 2008, 2012. I was actually a delegate to the national convention for him, the Republican National Convention in Tampa. It's like my claim to fame. But at least in libertarian circles. So I was on this site called Daily Paul. It was like my homepage, basically. It was like all things Ron Paul all the time. And I'd check it like daily. And so the white paper popped up on there pretty early.
I can imagine.
As a gold bug, I just was like, what is this BS digital product, whatever. And but at some point I ended up reading the white paper, and I had a friend of mine who's kind of a more technical guy than I am as far as programming. I was like, hey, have you looked at this? Like, it's actually kind of interesting. And we sent some emails back and forth, and I was going to, during 2011, a lot of that was consumed by like, my spare time was consumed by like Ron Paul, like campaign and all that kind of stuff. And so after the campaign though, after that Republican National Convention, when I realized that politics was just like
not the solution
starter.
It's not the solution to the problem.
I was like, what? There's got to be something else out there, because this politics thing is just garbage. Like it's just soul sucking.
It doesn't move the needle.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, you get it's basically futile. And so, I was like, well, this Bitcoin thing could, and so I kind of front burnered that a little bit, and I was like, I'm gonna just get involved. I'm gonna start mining it. That was like summer 2012. And
started mining in summer 2012?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No,
you thought about mining it.
Here's what happened. I go on Google. I'm like, all right, I want to mine. What do I need to get? What kind of hardware do I need to get?
At that point, it's a laptop.
Well, no, you still need, by that time, you still need GPUs.
By 2012?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
And I remember I fired up my old machine I used for like recording, because it had like a decent GPU in it.
Okay.
And I got it hooked up. I got the Bitcoin Core wallet installed. I got it mining, and it was like gonna mine like a Bitcoin. It was only gonna mine a Bitcoin like every week.
Only a Bitcoin every week.
Yeah.
Which,
and
you gotta understand, what was Bitcoin worth at the time?
It was like single digits.
Yeah.
And so
which sounded ridiculous at the time.
Yeah, and I was like, this, and so I literally, the words that went through my head were, this isn't even worth the wear and tear on my GPU. Like, because it was like a $200 GPU or something when I bought it.
And if you think about it, a lot of people say, oh God, I remember when you could mine Bitcoin on a GPU. And the definition of could mine is a little skewed, because yeah, you could mine on a GPU, but you could kind of mine on a GPU today. It's just that you wouldn't be profitable. Yeah. But technically you weren't really profitable then either.
Well, yeah,
like a dollar or $5, you said single digits, right?
Yeah.
So mining a Bitcoin, $8, $9 a week may have easily not been profitable at that time,
especially with the power.
With the power usage, exactly.
But so that was maybe 3 or 4 months before I started. I was like, okay, I am going to start Bitcoin mining. And I started Googling, what kind of hardware should I get that would actually be profitable? And what kept popping up was all these Google AdWords for, oh my God, the name just left my head. It was, oh my God.
One of these graphics cards?
No, it was
miners.
It was the first ASIC company. They were like huge scammers.
Butterfly
Labs.
Yeah, I remember them.
So, and these banner ads. So anytime I Googled, like, okay, if I go to a website anywhere, these banner ads would pop up, and like the advertised hash rates are like 100x.
Yeah.
Everything I'm looking at, and they're like shipping in September.
Of course.
I'm like, well, and so I'm looking at all these calculators, like, I can buy this rig and it'll pay for itself in a year, but look, these things are coming out. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And so I called Butterfly Labs too and talked to them about maybe getting a thing, but it seemed too shady to me, so I didn't. And I'm glad
Oh, you didn't? So you didn't fall for it?
I didn't fall for it because it was, yeah.
But then it held you off on actually mining.
So I didn't, and so it wasn't until February. It was when my son was born, actually, February 2013, and that's when Bitcoin went from like $10 or $15 to like $75 or $100, and I was like, I missed the boat again. I missed it. And the ASICs hadn't come out yet. The Butterfly Labs had not shipped yet. All that time later, and it turns out what they're doing, because I remember thinking to myself, like, why would they sell these if they could just like, if this thing,
money printing
if this thing
machines
pays for itself in a weekend,
right?
Like,
why would
if you do the math, like with the hash rate is, if you don't, based on the difficulty of when I'm looking at the ads, if it pays for itself on the weekend, why would you sell it? And that's exactly what happened. Like, yeah, so they're all like that. The difficulties started going up a lot before Butterfly Labs even delivered.
I wonder what made them.
It was a burn-in.
Exactly.
You got to make sure this stuff works,
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, quality control.
Anyway, we did that at Nvidia, but not for that long.
So I was like, and another thing happened as well. Litecoin had gotten pretty prominent by then. So I was like, okay, the ASICs aren't out.
GPU mine Litecoin.
And I have something else I can do with these after the fact. And so that's what happened. So
actually, you'd mentioned ever since Ethereum went to proof of stake that as a miner you started looking out there, well, what's there to mine? What about Litecoin?
Litecoin is
kind of ASIC mine
ASICs. Now? Yeah, since 20. Actually, the first time I heard about Script ASICs was at the conference where I met you.
Okay.
There's this guy named Brad Mills who I met there, and yeah,
see, he's one of the
Brad
Bitcoin
Mills.
The Brad Mills that's kind of on
Brad
Twitter
Mills.
troll. Brad, if you happen to be listening,
I like Brad.
I've had some disagreements.
We still talk every now and then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was there, and he had a big mining operation that he was starting, or he had one already, but he told me they would get some Script ASICs. I was like, oh no, really? I was like,
yeah,
because but yeah, Brad Mills, he and I commiserated because Mtgox had already happened, and he and I both lost money in the same exact way. Neither of us had money on Mtgox, but we went to this website called Bitcoin Builder or btcbuilder.com or something. This brilliant guy made because Mtgox, you could still, even though the website was, you could no longer withdraw Bitcoin, you could still send Bitcoin to other users on Mtgox, which is not a feature I think any other exchange has now. But
Coinbase had it. I think they still have it. Because back when they weren't an exchange, you could send Coinbase to Coinbase users. And they used to actually even go on chain until they said, why are we doing this on chain? There was no reason for us to do this on chain, so they stopped. But
so this guy set up a market. He was like, send me your Gox Bitcoins and I'll credit you Gox Bitcoins on my site, and then people can send in real Bitcoins, and he made a market for it.
Right, I remember this.
Brad,
it's a derivative of Bitcoin because you take the risk that you don't get the Gox coins.
So I actually I was up to like 40 Gox points at one point.
Oh man!
But then it all went. But Brad had lost like 100 Bitcoin.
Wow.
On that, if I recall, I only lost like 10 or 8. But
still painful.
Yeah, very painful. So yeah, that's how I met Brad Mills, and he was an interesting guy.
Oh, that is. I know he's. We've known of each other for quite some time, and I know that when we were a pure play Bitcoin company, he was a pseudo fan, followed us at least.
Well, he might not like me then talking about his old Litecoin mining days.
Well, the funny thing is he has been free to admit that he will dabble in what he calls shitcoins to increase his Bitcoin stash.
Yes.
Right. So he's been free to admit that. So I don't think
we've talked about other coins before. Like because in like DeFi summer, he was definitely like farming stuff.
Oh yeah.
He and I were chatting about that.
No, he definitely admits that, but he won't give long-term credit to anything else. Like I don't hear him see the value of, generally speaking, Ethereum, DeFi, from the viewpoint of anything other than get more Bitcoin. Right. So he's maybe a hair less maxi than some others, but he'll definitely throw down a gauntlet if someone says that, hey, there's some value in holding this other asset, and use case that competes with Bitcoin.
I remember when I started coming to meetups, so in 2013, there was sort of like a Bitcoin maximalism thing going on but it was really because it really was the only game in town.
Yeah,
and all these other things were kind of fly by night.
They're true garbage.
And weird stuff. But then when less garbagey stuff started coming out and a lot more kind of legitimate projects, I mean, and of course Litecoin got a lot of shade thrown at it because it literally changed like two
three parameters.
Yeah. And it was kind of a copycat. But then it felt like the maxi thing kind of went away for a long time.
And it just came back.
And then it came back, and it came back like with a vengeance. Like it wasn't even on my radar as something to think about.
Yeah.
And then, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I started, because my meetup's called Bitcoin Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I'd meet people at other meetups in town, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I saw your meetup, but I'm interested in more than Bitcoin."
Bitcoin, yeah.
I'm like, well, we talk about all kinds of things, anything crypto related, like what? And it's so strange to me how things. I guess it makes sense on some level how things have factionalized.
They have. We've actually changed the name of the meetup in San Diego.
Yeah.
To accommodate and let people know that we love Bitcoin. We talk about Bitcoin, but we're open to other things. And so I don't know if you have ever been to the meetup in Chicago. That was originally, I think, founded by Andreas Antonopoulos, Pamela Morgan, Hannah Rosenberg was also a main organizer. And they took the name Bitcoin and Open Blockchain.
Right.
Bob, right? The Bob meetup. And so we borrowed that, and with their permission, I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no trademark or whatnot." And I like the boundary that it sets, because we're not going to go talk about private blockchains and Corda and all that nonsense. Like that's where we draw the line. Because if you just say it's a crypto conference, and then suddenly this, like, personally, I think like real garbage starts to come in. And that's a debatable thing. There's people that love private blockchains and whatnot, but that's at least where we drew the line. Now, there's still other lines as far as what we'll do. Like we're not going to go and have one coin present and whatnot, but it definitely opens up to at least chatting about definitely other protocols, DeFi and whatnot.
Well, for me, it's always been, and since the very beginning, I've said, I've kind of thought that it's possible that, or more than possible, that whatever ends up being the true disruptor of CeFi, centralized finance, and gives fiat currency a run for its money, it might not be Bitcoin.
Right.
It'll be some generational grandchild.
Or a combination of Bitcoin, a few things.
And so to me, it's always just been like, hey, whatever works.
Right.
And let 1,000 flowers bloom, so to speak.
Yep, exactly.
And the market will hopefully sort them out to the point where, and actually that's one thing that, crypto gets a lot of slack for being volatile. And I mean, we could talk about a little bit about the FTX thing if you want, but it's just the latest example of like giant, meteoric rise, spectacular
fall-ups. Yeah.
And, you have to think, if this was like a normal, like regulated, centralized finance situation, it probably wouldn't get sorted out. These things can maybe carry on much longer. Like crypto has a very short life cycle because the volatility. I mean, it just really shakes out, like it really weeds out the chaff.
It falls out really quickly. It does also elevate the garbage very quickly too.
This is also true.
That's when people think volatility in crypto, they usually think price volatility. But what they don't realize is also volatility in like product volatility. Like what's the hot thing now? Whether it be an exchange, a wallet, a currency, a token, a DeFi protocol, you can go and skyrocket quickly, and then you can crash quickly. And that kind of is free market principles, if you think about it, because there's so few barriers to entry, but then there's also fewer moats, which I do like, right? There's fewer moats. So whatever you do, whatever innovation you come up with in crypto, you need to retain that innovation. You have to retain that competitive advantage. You don't get it. You don't get it for free forever. Whereas in traditional finance, say, or even in just traditional non-crypto, think like the Ubers of the world, right? They entered a specific market and came in when there wasn't any regulation. They established the name, they established the network effect, and now they are working with a pretty strong regulatory framework where the moat is tight for anyone else to come in. Like nobody that had the resources of Uber back when they formed could possibly create a competitor to Uber. Right. Even if they had an angle, a UX, a product that was better, they can't, because you need to pay for the lawyers in all the different jurisdictions, countries, states, and whatnot. And that's definitively true in traditional finance, absolutely. And crypto, at least pure play crypto, self custody, protocol level crypto, not like fully centralized exchanges, that is a similar situation you have there, in that there's much less of a moat to come in and compete. So other products can come in, other services, other protocols. Ironically, we're talking about the collapse of a centralized service, but realize many of these centralized services came up very quickly because they'd either be in a jurisdiction that didn't have a whole lot of regulation. Like, FTX didn't launch FTX US. Yeah, they're in the Bahamas. How did Binance become the biggest exchange in the world when Coinbase was the global name? They didn't launch in the US. Yeah. So launching in low regulated areas or no regulated areas is where the moat isn't there and the innovation can grow.
Well, what's interesting about the Sam Bankman-Fried situation is, there's CZ, came out from Binance and said that he had gotten wind that basically Sam's trying to like push regulation that would not harm FTX, but harm like
DeFi and self-custody.
or Binance, specific. And so, and just yesterday, interview was released with George Stephanopoulos. I don't know if you saw it, but Sam sat down. I don't know what's wrong with this kid. But he needs to listen to his lawyers because I don't know what he's trying to do. But at the end of the interview, George asked him, what was it like to go from being worth $40 billion to zero?
Negative.
Yeah.
The guy should be worth negative. He shouldn't be worth zero. Yeah. Everyone's saying he went to zero. No, he
said in that interview he had $100,000 in his bank, and I was like, well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, you should be. Well, you might have $100,000, but you should have a debt worth several billion, meaning that you're worth negative.
Yeah. So, but one thing he said, he was like, we kind of thought like because he asked, George Stephanopoulos asked, was it ego that kept you from doing? And he's like, yeah, we did get pretty cocky, and I guess we kind of thought that we had made it. That's what those were his exact words. I guess we kind of felt like we had made it, and I think part of that was because of his, I guess, political doning and his work on the regulatory side. I think for him, maybe making it, part of it was clinching the regulatory capture to where he could have, kept it going and kept the barriers up. And I think that was part of his strategy, a big part of his strategy. I suspect. I might be wrong.
And I think in traditional finance, you do end up with that too big to fail type of system because you always have the lifeline of a bailout.
Right.
And crypto doesn't offer that. So it's harsher, but it's more honest.
Yeah.
Right. You have to run a legitimate business, and a little kink in the armor gets just torn open in the crypto world. And there's nothing that could save you because you can't print more crypto. You can't dilute the losses.
You can try.
You can try, but you can't dilute it across everyone in a country.
Yeah.
Right. For them, they could print more FTT and dilute it across FTT holders, but that's one very small subset of the ecosystem that's using your product. Whereas the government can print dollars, and that's a huge subset of people, right, that get impacted, and so it dilutes that impact. So it's harsh, but it's honest, and I think the harshness decreases over time as the businesses are required to be more honest. Then this type of thing happens hopefully less and less. And I think,
well, you saw that in your slideshow was it your slideshow? FTX. I mean, Mtgox was barely even moving the needle now.
It used to be at the very top, 300 million at the time. Yeah. Right. Those were all at the time, not today. But at the Mtgox 300
billions
million. Yeah, I put out a tweet a while back, putting everything into retrospect, with FTX having lost eight-ish billion of consumer funds, and how big they were in the industry. And it was fascinating to believe that the amount that Mtgox lost, the amount of Bitcoin that Mtgox lost, was 7 to 8% of all Bitcoin at the time. As big as FTX is, they were 7% of Bitcoin, and they were about 20% of the trading volume in the world. At peak, 70% of the trading volume in the world was Gox. They collapsed and we recovered. Took a while, but we did recover.
Right.
FTX, in both metrics of trade volume and in like Bitcoin crypto held, is less than 1%.
Right.
But that 1% is huge.
Yeah.
Crypto's grown a ton, but it's still a sub 1%. And so there's many other product services that are available to service the need. Whereas when Gox went down, there were only a few things that we could use outside of Gox that had liquidity, but they were enough to keep the industry going. And
Right.
so I think put things into perspective for a lot of people. Said, okay, we'll recover. When you realize that, like, we didn't take out the whole industry, took out 1% of it.
Yeah,
but
it'll
there
come
is an
back from
impression.
this. But one thing, if the globe does go into a recession, this will be the first
recession that Bitcoin sees.
Bitcoin sees. So
And that's
it's gonna be
neither
interesting.
yeah, and admittedly, I think it's going to be an extreme one way or another. It's either going to be extremely like Bitcoin does very poorly, or it's going to be extreme that Bitcoin does way better than it ever did in any one of its bear. Or
What's your gut say?
it's going to be extreme, but not in the middle.
Okay.
So that's
You're not going to do like a 60-40 call.
yeah.
No.
No, it's going to be where like we either have like a really long bear market and we don't see like the next halving doesn't make a dent type of a thing, and it goes even further down than the rest of the markets, or it's the one thing that people flock to and there's like nothing left. Like, this is the safe haven, the true safe haven. We finally diverge from traditional markets, kind of like how gold always has diverged from traditional markets and generally speaking. And so, except that way more accessible to people than gold.
Right.
So I feel like it's an extreme one way or on the other. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I 99% hope it's the latter.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's hard to predict. It's never happened.
It's going to be the former.
Yeah.
But I actually have some. I wish I was a better hodler of Bitcoin. Obviously, and like I haven't sold a single ounce of silver that I bought, in like 2010, 11 or whatever, and it's worth like exactly the same that it was then. And if I had
dollar-wise or in buying power?
Actually, it's worth less
in buying
power.
So it's retained dollar value.
It's I mean, just now it's basically back to like what I paid like on average for most of it probably. So, and I look back at some of those invoices from like 2011, 12, even some in 13, and I was like, if only I
bought Bitcoin.
Yeah, I wouldn't have this conversation.
You're hearing that, Peter Schiff?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, thanks, Peter. He actually, I followed him quite closely back then.
Yeah, a lot of people did. I know some people that worked for him that are in Bitcoin crypto now.
Yeah, but
Ash Oro, if you're listening, he was working with what's Peter's company's name again?
Euro Pacific.
Yeah, he actually worked for him for I think a few years.
I've met Peter several times. He's a interesting character. He's definitely on the spectrum. Yeah, somewhere. I'm thinking.
I'm starting to question whether or not he truly doesn't like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or if it's just it's like just an image.
A shtick now. I've actually wanted to debate him about it because I feel like a lot
debate him Bitcoin or debate whether he actually doesn't like Bitcoin.
I'll do both of those.
Both of those, okay.
Because I feel like a lot of people that debate him, I don't know. I feel like they go about it the wrong way. They don't know him well enough. I've been following him for like a couple decades. Well, no, a decade.
You don't think Voorhees knows him?
Okay, yeah.
I feel like you would know him really, really well.
Did Voorhees and him debate?
Oh yeah.
Was it good? It had to have been.
I mean, define good, because I mean, Schiff he's not going to hold a candle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, did you see? I think it may have been what sparked this whole downfall. Did you see the interview with Voorhees and SBF?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Wow, that was a good one.
Yeah, and I remember taking away one nugget from that, which I think people listening to this should keep to heart about regulation, because regulation was the biggest topic that they disagreed on. And not regulation as a whole, but what to regulate. Like, Voorhees is like, okay, I get regulating this, I get regulating that, blah, blah, blah. But the one part that I don't really think it affects Binance. So it wasn't regulation that would negatively affect Binance in any way.
Okay.
But it was regulation of like pure software, right? Like, should pure software get regulated? Should the interfaces to access blockchains be regulated? And when I heard that SBF was pro that, that's when I'm like, throw them out the window. Right? That in and of itself was, I think, the the opinion that, at least in my eyes, brought about his downfall to a lot of the crypto community. Because you do that, you've kind of eliminated access, and the biggest reason why crypto is accessible globally. And that's its biggest benefit, right? It's this global accessibility. It's that censorship resistance. If you're trying to regulate software, then you're not going to get that. And worse, part two is much of that software cannot get regulated. You can't regulate it. It's just open source. Someone can download it. You're just going to regulate the businesses that are providing a better UX and service to legitimate users. Mm-hmm. And you will 100% not bother to stop any of the illegitimate activity, because that activity is willing to jump through hoops.
Yeah.
Right? They'll jump through hoops and compile software if they need to off GitHub or some random site to be able to access crypto. But an everyday person that wants to access it will want to use apps off the App Store and download them from legitimate sites. And so you'll 100% not eliminate anything illegitimate.
Then that makes you kind of ask what is the real impetus behind all these regulations? Because are they really trying to, it's like
protect the consumer.
Protect the consumer.
No, absolutely not.
Or stop the criminals. Like it's like the take away the guns thing. It's like, do you think criminals aren't going to find guns? Like,
in the world of crypto privacy, crypto/privacy/ censorship resistance, the people that have gone to jail have not taken $1 from people. Mm-hmm. Like no one lost any money from the services that Ross Ulbricht, provided, that Julian Assange provided, that many have provided. Yet this guy's lost 10 billion of user funds, and not jail. So I don't think they're protecting consumers in any way, shape, or form. I think that's widely known. You probably know. None of this is new for you. But it's so more radically apparent now than ever. Like, consumer protection is absolutely not the end goal.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that, even if he doesn't end up going to jail, which is, I have no idea how that wouldn't happen, but
it's not looking like it.
There's a way. I'm glad he got his comeuppance. I've had kind of sour grapes about FTX for like 2 years, because I realized they were kind of shady. In November 2020, they did something, and it's actually kind of back in the news because this token called Trump Lose is still on their balance sheet for some reason. But during the election, they had a betting market. And it was pretty clever what they did. Like, as a business, they had some decent ideas. So they had a betting market for Trump win, Trump lose on the platform, but they also had an ERC20 token so you could send it out and make secondary markets with it. So like Poloniex had made a secondary market with Trump win and Trump lose tokens. But of course,
sounds like Augur.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But of course, the guarantor was FTX. So I mean, that's where you would cash them out. And so FTX, in the original terms, I wrote a little article about this. I was very mad about it. So I wrote I don't ever write articles, but I wrote an article about this. They, in the original terms, they said if by November 5th there's not a clear winner, then the tokens will settle on February 1st, whoever is inaugurated.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, as the election, the votes were being counted and everything dragged on. The November 5th came and went, and so everybody who had the tokens was just like, okay, well, I guess we'll
wait till February,
find out what happens in February. But then they changed the terms.
Oh, geez.
And they said, and they literally like changed the terms on the on the website of the token. So I went to the Wayback Machine, got the original terms,
right,
and screenshotted that and screenshotted this, and then
what were the new terms?
And so I was thinking, it was, well, I can't remember exactly, but I'll link the article in the description. But it was basically like if they took away the November 5th deadline, they just took it away.
So there's no deadline at all?
Yeah. So so then they said, okay, now it's settled on November the 10th or 12th or 7th or whatever it was, the 9th. Mm-hmm. And they paid out all the Trump lose tokens. And
even though no one was inaugurated yet.
Yeah, right. And so they changed the terms of the token. It's a futures contract, and they changed how it settled.
What you're buying changed.
Yes.
The token that you're buying's changed,
and
which wouldn't happen
ex post facto.
And that can't change on a DeFi type of equivalent.
Right. So people started calling him out on this, and as I looked into it, I then realized that they were fairly large Biden donors.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, they probably have a huge position in this, and they want to cash it in.
Yeah.
They don't want to wait for whatever reason. Probably because he,
eventually
probably because he's running a
inaugurated.
Ponzi scheme, and he needed the money now or something.
Yeah.
But so at one point they were right. In that they, that is how it settled out.
Yeah.
But
the timing was wrong.
But they changed the terms of futures contract.
Yeah.
Which is
not a futures contract.
Problematic. And so then they on Twitter, they were just going after the people who were calling them out. And they were like calling them trolls, and so they were like, one of the tweets was like, okay, we're never going to do this again, but we're going to give into the trolls this time.
Oh,
and they offered a new token called Trump Feb, and they offered it at like a 1-to-7 ratio. So if you had 7 Trump win tokens, you'd get 1 Trump Feb, and so a bunch of people did this conversion and took basically a big haircut if it was to actually settle.
Right.
And then finally people made enough noise about that they rolled that back, and they said, okay, we're going to take it back to the original
Trump
terms or whatever, but they'd already paid out the Trump lose. So it's like, I was like, this is a terrible business decision, because now if by some strange reason he gets in, they're gonna have to pay double.
Yeah.
And anyhow, the way they handled it was totally scammy, and so I just never used them again.
That's the first inclination red flag.
Yeah, it was kind of a red flag, and looking back at how things have. But then so I always thought they were kind of shady, but then it's this meteoric rise and
Uber crash.
And well, I mean, you're like, wow, these guys really going to be around forever? And but it's so, I don't know.
I feel like the company got what it deserved. Definitely the people within it. There's something shady for absolutely sure going on, in combination with politics, FTX, SBF, his parents, everyone he's connected to, his donations and media. And it's completing the loop, not trying to get into other very debatable topics, but media's shown that they will hide the truth. It's happened time and time again. And just in the span of the past couple of years, the hiding of truth from the pandemic all the way to hiding truth from FTX. I don't know if you saw, but one of the lawyers that I know very well in the crypto space was on a mainstream media episode, and as soon as she mentioned fraud allegations, the whole thing got cut off. Nothing aired.
Wow. For FTX?
For SBF specifically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they didn't air anything. And it's like, what the hell? You went to interview this person, you wanted their insight. They're, a lawyer, they're barred. So why is their opinion suddenly invalid? Mm-hmm. Right? You didn't. It's as corrupt as it gets.
I know you were pretty vocal during the pandemic. I'd never seen you pop up in my Facebook feed so much as during that time. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all? Or
I've been in crypto for a while, and it's a political technology, no question about it. Mm-hmm. I never involved. And for the most part, my posts on Facebook, I'm not on Facebook a whole lot. My posts on Facebook were most family-oriented, friends-oriented, and whatnot, that kind of thing. I only included business when it was hey, give this a try, an edge during the bull markets, get people off centralized services. But I think the thing about the pandemic is it hit home because it threatened my family, right? And Facebook is a place of family and friends. Mm-hmm. And so the mandates that were coming around were legitimately, in my eyes, threatening the livelihood of my family, my kids, what they were going to mandate on my kids. And once you've done that, you've crossed the line. I will stand up and scream at the top of my lungs on what I believe in, because now it's less about, oh, well, I'm going to invest in this, HODL that, financial theory and whatnot. And that'll keep the Twitter,
Right.
but when it's touching my kids, you're going to touch my kids, I'm going to scream.
Right.
And that's where I hit home. So yeah, I was active during that time until it seemed to wither away. So thank God. So far it has withered away.
Yeah, I think the CDC did just come out and talk about possibly making it like the vaccine mandatory for school vaccine, but that seems pretty. I actually met a guy who worked at CDC. There's a lot of CDC people here, like in Atlanta. It's based here, and so I met a retired CDC guy. He retired in 2019, and he's like,
you know why? Because he knew it was coming.
He's like, well, man, no, he seems like a cool guy, but he
did you hear the statement from Fauci from like 2018, 19? He had said it was for sure one of the things that Biden is going to run into during his term, or Trump was going to run into during his term, is a wide scale infectious outbreak.
Really? Where do you say that?
Look it up.
Okay.
I don't know, but yeah, you can listen to me actually say that, and you're like, what the?
Yeah.
How the hell did you know this?
Yeah.
Well, of course you know this. Why would you even question this?
So yeah, anyhow, this guy from CDC, we were talking about, he actually has never gotten COVID, and he never got the vaccines either. And he said, I'm not going to take an experimental vaccine. Yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, the party line is
about that. Will you state that publicly?
He says he's talked about it. He said he's still in he's still on the threads from CDC, and he still like bounces in from time to time. But, and then we talked about kids, and he said that, they're at de minimis risk from COVID, and even more so now. But that was the case all along.
On day one.
And so, it is just a very strange
both of,
situation.
and I come from that, even from the viewpoint that I don't know if you know, but both my wife and I were like early cases of COVID. Like I don't know what they called it. It was like,
I was an early
Delta.
adopter as well.
What's that?
I was an early adopter as well.
Early adopter of COVID. Yeah.
That was March 2020.
Yeah, March 2020.
Yeah.
Exact class of March 2020, right? There you go. And admittedly, the case was severe. It took me a while to recover.
Oh, really?
For me, it was, and so with my wife. But the whole time, I remember my wife was like really sick in bed, and we just had our kid, and our kid was in bed with her all the time, like breastfeeding. Never got anything. Not to this day, she hasn't had any symptoms at all. Like, she can be sickly at times, like cold, whatnot. Never tested positive for COVID. And so it's just exactly what you said. It's a de minimis risk, whereas the risk in the vaccine is measurable.
Love that word now.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah,
but it's definitely a tongue twister. But it's definitely a known and calculable risk. And there's no reason for it. So, that's why I became really vocal. Lost a lot of friends. That kind of flamed me hard, and family,
especially living
too.
in California, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I don't care that I'm in California, because I know it's going to be a hot topic there, but I care what I care about wherever I am. And so none of our family is vaxxed. For my wife, I'm like, well, why do we care? We got the best vax. We got sick, recovered. No need. So
after I didn't find out that I had it until May.
Okay.
I suspected I had it in March, and but there were no tests. Like they didn't. Like the doctor my GP was like, well, if you're dying, you can go to the hospital and they have tests there.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not dying. I actually had a really mild case. But I got an antibody test in May, and that came back positive, and I was like, woohoo! And basically, I just any restrictions, whatever I had put myself under, I just was like,
fuck it,
out the window. And my doctor was actually cool enough to be. He was like, hey. He literally said, don't believe the fake news that you don't have immunity, because if this is like any other virus that's ever existed on the face of the planet, you should have some amount of immunity for some amount of time.
Right.
And so yeah, I was thankful for him for saying that.
You know where he got it?
Where he got the information?
Where you possibly got it
from? I went to a conference in Orlando.
Oh, okay. And just a conference, okay. I was actually taking care of my wife, and she was in bed coughing like mad. I didn't, we didn't have masks in the house, and I didn't really care to wear one. Yeah. So I was with her hours on end. So I was like, cross fingers, but I'll probably get it. But yeah, I got a pretty bad case.
Actually, did you see the SNL skit the other day? That's if your life's grinding you down and just too much to take, try COVID. It's like a 9-day vacation. And
you get to lock yourself up in the room.
And so that's actually literally what it was like for me. We have this suite, upstairs that we built, and so I got, as soon as I got a fever, my wife was like, seriously, and sent me upstairs, and the whole time, I was up there. You're supposed to quarantine for like 7 days or something. Right. I hear the kids just driving her insane. I'm like,
hanging out on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm just on my computer,
playing some games, watching some Netflix.
Yeah, just doing whatever, and I only had a fever for like a day, and so after about a day and a half, she's like, your fever's been gone for a while now, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, you come back down here. I was like,
help me out.
Yeah, it was
no, for us it was the reverse. For like a week, I was working while with the newborn, bouncing on my stand-up desk while she was sick. There's no way she was coming down. She had a fever for weeks, I was definitely the one taking the load for a while until she got better, and then I got sick.
Got it.
Then it was reverse. So we tag team on that one, so that worked out in the end. But,
well, before I know you have to go. You got to catch a flight.
Yeah.
Before you go, I wanted to maybe wrap this up with privacy.
Yeah,
and
big topic.
I know that Edge has been a leader in privacy in a lot of ways for Bitcoin.
Many ways and many ways not. So it's one of those, like, there's some things. I like to say we lead from the viewpoint of privacy for, I call it like privacy for everyone, even the people that don't care about it.
Right.
So we want to deliver it where people don't jump through
Why
hoops.
is it important to give it to people who don't care about it?
Oh, that's a good question. You probably know the answer to this already, right? You do. Just throwing me a softball, Rich. So
next time I'll do the hard questions.
Yeah, give me some hard questions, and we'll come back
Get
for
your
those.
blood pumping.
I mean, think about privacy. Think about, like, say you want to go to a party and people don't know who you are, and 20 people are invited, and you're the only one showing up with like a hood on your head. If you're the only one showing up with a hood on your head and there's 20 people invited, they can probably figure out who you are.
Okay.
Right. So you're the only one using the privacy technology of a hood on your head.
I see.
If 19 people are showing up, you don't really know who's who. You don't know who's saying what, blah, blah, blah. So privacy is kind of like liquidity in an exchange, right? You want to go where the liquidity is. There's a lot of people there. You want to use the tools that people are using because you get better privacy when more people are using it. And so I fundamentally feel like I want to support privacy that is accessible to everyone, because even if only I or you and Snowden and if a small group of us care about privacy, if we give it to everybody, they improve our privacy, even if they don't care about it.
Right.
And an interesting example of this, and I'll give this unfortunately recently draconian company some credit, which is Apple. Apple has the single most widespread used privacy communication tool on the planet, which is iMessage. Mm-hmm. My mom uses it, my wife uses it, all my friends use it, blah, 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 because they're not on Android. But when they send a message, it's end-to-end encrypted, right? Government can't break it.
Right.
So, but they don't care, and they don't even know. It just automatically happens. That's the thing that we try to build at Edge, right? And by them using it, who's going to go after anyone with iMessage because you're trying to be private and secret? Whereas when I use Signal, it's almost like a red flag. Like, why are you Signal?
Yeah.
What are you trying to hide?
Actually, it's funny. I when I get friends to like join Signal or something like that, because it's actually been my primary messaging app for a long time, since it was text secure. I don't know how long ago that was.
So I used it back then, but the UX sucks so bad I didn't use it. Yeah, I tried using it.
I've used it since it was text secure as my main messaging app, and they're about to screw me over because they're getting rid of SMS support.
In Signal?
Yes.
I didn't even know they'd had it because in Edge,
Well,
in
no,
Edge,
no,
in iPhone, they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but anyhow,
Yeah.
I would tell people, hey, tip me on Signal, and they'd be like, but that's weird. My drug dealer uses Signal.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly.
like what do you?
I don't want to join that crowd. Blah blah blah.
And so I think it is that. Like I know that a big thing for you, like you're doing Zcash, and you only do the private transactions in the Edge wallet.
Even the Zcash team doesn't like that we do that.
Yeah, because it clogs their blockchain probably.
Well, no, it actually that part isn't the issue. It's that that means that people can't withdraw their funds from Coinbase into Edge.
Oh, okay.
Well,
oh darn.
Oh darn, exactly. Oh darn, they're just gonna have to buy Zcash inside Edge, So,
but yeah, it's almost that idea that when you do if you use it in the clear transactions, 99% of the time, when you send that one that's like, oh, I'm gonna encrypt this one, then it's like it's like, hey, what?
Yeah,
why'd you
do that for?
With that one?
Yeah.
And you guys were one of the first wallets to integrate Monero. Well.
Yeah, 2018, when I think it was only like a My Monero or Monerujo and these Monero specific, really early UX, like you could tell it was like a hacker UX experience you'd get. Yeah, we incorporated Monero. And yeah, I think the community really appreciated that because it was the first really more mass adopted app to support it.
And that's paid off dividends for you guys too, right? Because it's one of your more popular.
Most popular, yeah. A lot of people came to our app because of Monero support. And so it definitely has been very worthwhile. And it's just a testament to what we've been trying to deliver, and even though those are the hard assets, hard isn't difficult, right? Not hard money, but hard assets to incorporate. They fit our ideology. They fit our motto and our mission. And
you said they amount to like 10% of your usage or something like that, or the?
Well, we don't know our quote unquote usage. The only thing we know is like trading volume.
Okay.
Like we don't know when someone sends Monero. We don't know when someone sends Zcash. We don't know when someone sends Bitcoin or Ethereum. Okay. We do know if they go through one of our exchange partners.
I see.
Right. And there, it's actually percentage wise, I don't recall. I just know where it ranks as far as like the most traded assets. Bitcoin's obviously on top. Monero is right underneath it.
Okay.
It even beats. I think it even beats Ethereum at times. I think it bounces between Monero and Ethereum.
Okay.
Yeah. So those two kind of bounce back and forth. So it's definitely of high demand, and there's just there's little tooling available for it because it is hard. It is hard. Yeah. And actually, one of our closed source competitors forked our Monero code, and I don't know if it's used in their app, but I would assume so because they forked our Monero code, made a few modifications, and then announced Monero support. And I say closed source competitors because we are open source,
right?
And I get it. It's open source. You can borrow the code, do what you want with it. Just we launched it. We were the first to market with it, and I think like half a year later, our closed source competitor, also multi-asset, launched support after notably forking the code that we worked,
right?
Months on end to build.
Right.
But okay.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with me.
No,
for everybody out there, get Edge Wallet.
Oh,
they also have new DeFi support.
Yeah.
For a lot of interesting DeFi applications.
Yeah.
And we're trying to Un-FTX the industry.
Absolutely. Prevent the next contagion.
Yes.
Yeah.
By self-custodied interaction with smart contracts only.
Exactly.
All self-custodied solutions.
That is the goal.
Awesome, man. Well, Thanks for coming out.
Thanks much. Thanks for having me.
And I'll see you next time.
Cool. Looking forward to episode 2.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.